From the beginning of the reign of Genghis Khan in 1206, the Mongol Empire began to expand across Asia and into Europe. The success of this expansion was mainly due to the unity of the Mongol tribes, as well as their military strategy, with leaders such as Genghis Khan, Ogedai, and Mongke leading successful campaigns against other nomadic and feudal civilizations. However, this unity was not to last forever, as the simple idea of succession would bring down the greatness of the Mongol Empire and tear it apart. My name is Alex, and I will be discussing why the Mongol system for succession was destructive to the Mongol Empire. In the Mongol Empire, all great Khans were elected via a kurultai, with Khans of subordinate Mongol states being elected in a similar fashion. A traditional Mongol kurultai would usually consist of Mongol chiefs from around the empire convening with one another to cast their vote as to who they believed would be best to rule over the vast Mongol Empire. Kurultais also served another purpose as well. A kurultai also served as an opportunity for the new leader to lay out their plans for the militaristic expansion of Mongol territory, as well as to assign all critical positions of leadership in their upcoming campaigns. Upon his election in 1206, Genghis Khan planned the majority of his military campaigns in this way. Once being elected, the new leader would go through a coronation ceremony to become Khan over the Mongol Empire, or whatever lands or people they resided over. This ceremony is recorded by a German traveller, Johann Schildberg, during his 15th century travels through the territory of the Golden Horde. He writes these events in his travel book, with which he documents vast amounts of information about the Mongols and other groups of tribes living in Asia at the time. He writes, and I quote, "When they choose a king, they take him and seat him on white felt, and raise him in it 3 times. Then they lift him up, and carry him around the tent, and seat him on a throne, and put a golden sword in his hand. Then he must be sworn, as it is the custom." Another crucial aspect of the election of a new Mongol ruler was that for a kurultai to take place, all the senior members of the tribe had to participate in order for it to be legitimate. These senior members of the tribe, however, were often military leaders, and therefore, upon the death of a Khan, these men would have immediately abandoned their military campaigns and typically travelled to the capital city of the Mongol Empire in order to cast their vote for the new Mongol leader. In Mongol history, this occurred in 1241 upon the death of Ogedai Khan, forcing the withdrawal of Mongol leaders and their armies from the outskirts of Vienna and Venice, and again in 1259 upon the death of Mongke Khan, causing the retreat of Mongol troops from Syria. In many cases, this severely hampered Mongol military expansion, as it had the potential to claim more land, most notably in Europe. In battle, the Mongols often had the tactical advantage, as they incorporated hunting tactics they had perfected on the steppe into effective military tactics that many enemies failed to counter. One such case of these adapted hunting tactics being used in battle is that of the account of Master Rogers, who witnessed the Battle of Sajo River on the 11th of April 1241. During the battle, the Mongols used what has become to be known as Nerge tactics, which involved encircling the enemy and slowly tightening the circle, killing men as they moved inwards. They would later create a gap in the encirclement only to lure Hungarian forces into an ambush, where many of the surviving Hungarians were slaughtered. Mongol military tactics may have arisen from a means to survive on the steppe. However, they proved to be most effective in combat situations during their military expansion. It can be argued that if the Mongols had continued to push further into Europe, that many more kingdoms would have fallen victim to superior Mongol military strategy. However, with the death of Ogedai later in 1241, the Mongol forces halted their advance through Europe and returned home to the Mongol capital in order to elect their new Khan at a kurultai. This action arguably saved the rest of Europe from total annihilation, and meant that the Mongol army never got any further than Eastern Europe, when it could quite easily have ascertained far more territory for the Mongol Empire to reside over. Another example of how Mongol ideology regarding succession affected the greater empire is that of the Tolawid Civil War, taking place during the aftermath of the death of Mongke Khan from 1260 to 1264. Upon enthronement at kurultais in 1250 and 1251, Mongke purged the royal houses of Chagatai and Ogedai families following the failed assassination attempt by the Ogedai candidate Shayamun and his cousin Naku. Mongke Khan later began to split control of the Mongol Empire himself, handing over control of the Caucasus to the Golden Horde in 1252, with Berke taking control of the Horde from his brother Batu, as well as its holdings in 1255. In 1259, however, Mongke Khan died while conducting a siege at Doyle fortress, most likely from dysentery or cholera. However, there are conflicting sources on how Mongke actually perished. Upon his death, Monkey left no mention of who should take up his throne and rule over Mongol territory. Historian Thomas Alison suggests that Monkey had grown fond of his brother, Arik Bokeh, who he had made commander of Karakorum in 1258. Meanwhile, his brother and rival to Bokeh and the Mongol throne, Kublai, was away from the Mongol homelands, and therefore Arik Bokeh held his own Kurultai at the Mongol capital, where he was pronounced Great Khan by a vast majority of Genghis Khan's descendants. Upon hearing this, Kublai returned to his own territory in Manchuria and northern China, where he held his own Kurultai in order to make his claim to the Mongol throne. Kublai failed to gain as much support as Arik Bokeh, however. The small number that attended represented all of the Borjigin lines except for that of Jochi. Kublai was now hailed as the Great Khan at his own Kurultai, becoming the first Kurultai to be held outside the Mongol homeland, and therefore set the stage for the beginning of the Tolawid Civil War. At the beginning of the conflict, Arik Bokeh allied himself with Berke Khan of the Golden Horde, as well as Olagu of the Chagatai Khanate. Kublai, on the other hand, only had one major military supporter, Hulagu. However, Berke and Hulagu would soon come to odds and would be consumed by their own war, the Berke-Hulagu War, and would therefore struggle to offer much support to their rival Khans. Another key factor in the Tolawid Civil War was that of gaining supplies for the upcoming conflict. While Kublai had the fertile lands of China to fall back on for supplies, Arik Bokeh had to resort to importing the vast majority of his supplies, as the steppe was not ideal for farmland. The need for supplies from China, however, caused Kublai to reform his approach to Mongol rule. Seeing his need for the full support of the Chinese populace in order to gain victory over Arik Bokeh, Kublai began to adopt a persona as a sage emperor, with the ability to unite China, Korea, and the rest of Mongolia under his rule. Kublai not only promised to reduce taxes, but took up the approach of modeling his new government institutions according to those of Chinese dynasties. This only fueled the argument of the traditionalists who backed Arik Bokeh, as they believed that Kublai was moving his rule style too far from the traditional Mongol leaders, such as Genghis Khan, further increasing the divide between the two opposing groups. Through his control of 3 of the 4 supply routes into Karakorum and his subsequent advance on the city, Kublai forced Arik Bokeh to evacuate the city and make camp over winter near a tributary to the Yangtze River. During this time, Kublai increased his supply of men and resources as well as strengthening defenses across northern China. Kublai's generals also scored a number of victories against some of Arik Bokeh's military leaders, stopping Bokeh from receiving supplies and blocking trade routes to his encampment. By the end of the winter, Arik Bokeh had but one supporter left by the name of Algu, who managed to defeat a rival claimant to the Chagatai Khanate sent by Kublai, becoming Khan of Chagatai, allowing for Arik Bokeh to be supplied with resources to continue the civil war. In 1261, the 2 rival Khans met at the Battle of Shimultai, resulting in a loss for Arik Bokeh. Bokeh would return 10 days later to take on Kublai again, but, even though he attacked forces not directly led by Kublai, the battle ended in a stalemate. This, followed by Algu turning his back on Arik Bokeh, meant he was left with few supporters. Rebellion in China drew the attention of Kublai away from Arik Bokeh, allowing him to strike at Algu. During the ensuing battle, Arik Bokeh managed to take the headquarters of Algu, but lost his commander, Kara Bakar, in the process. Now, with very few allies left at his disposal, and more of his supporters deserting him by the day, Arik Bokeh surrendered to Kublai upon the threat of an impending attack by Algu in 1264. Kublai imprisoned his brother and ignored him for a year as punishment. Then, after considerable purges of people believed to sympathize with Arik Bokeh, Kublai held a Kurultai to consolidate his power and decide what to do with his imprisoned brother. This Kurultai was followed by the mysterious death of his brother in prison, as it is believed that Kublai poisoned Arik Bokeh instead of publicly executing him. Unfortunately for Kublai, the recent civil wars of succession of Mongol Empire led to him being unable to stop his new empire from fracturing into multiple different states. Berke and Hulagu continued to fight one another until Hulagu's death in 1265. Meanwhile, the Ogadai family line sought to exact revenge on the Tolui family line for the Kurultai and subsequent purge of their family in 1251. All these things considered, the other Khans of the neighboring Khanates did not recognize Kublai as their great Khan. In fact, they never even showed up to his Kurultai to confirm Kublai's status. The 4 Khanates became functionally independent sovereign states, with some sharing knowledge and resources with one another. However, the 4 Khanates would never work together militarily again. The way in which a Mongol leader would have been chosen can be argued to have had some serious flaws. With the need for all high-ranking military officials and elders of the tribe to convene in the Mongol homeland for a Kurultai, this action led to Mongol military expansion being hampered, especially in Europe, where the Mongols had a serious advantage over their European counterparts. Furthermore, the lack of successor after the death of Monkey, coupled with the competitive nature of Mongol society, led to civil war that only tore the empire apart. Therefore, the way that Mongols conducted their succession practices, as well as the lack of clear leadership in the latter years of the empire, can be argued to have been the beginning of the end for Mongol power in the region.